We are the flag bearers of the innovations of the past, the champions of what is to come. This is the gathering place, the proving ground, where hands-on experience separates reality from rumor. This is a pilgrimage site for all those who thrive on the business of consumer technologies. See what's next.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Senior Vice President of Communications and Strategic Relationships for the Consumer Electronics Association, Jeff Joseph.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Welcome to the CES. The International CES is the global stage for innovation where the world's top brands launch their products, companies large and small. As you walk the show floor, a record over 2 million net square feet this year, you'll see innovations from the world's most popular brands. But many new products and services also come from companies that have not established a brand identity yet. This morning's Brand Matters keynote brings together executives to discuss how technology and digital platforms are impacting marketing and brand strategy. Today, a panel of top executives who represent some of the world's top brands will discuss marketing. Michael Casson, an internationally recognized business strategist, will lead the conversation. Michael is the founder of MediaLink, an advisory firm that counsels clients in the marketing, media, and entertainment industries. Based in Los Angeles and New York City, MediaLink provides strategic direction for marketing, brand development, and business strategy for many of the Fortune 100's biggest global brands. Michael will introduce today's distinguished panelists from the worlds of entertainment, publishing, and advertising to discuss how technology pushes them to test the boundaries of their creativity. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great show, and please welcome Michael Casson.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, and good morning. Welcome to the Brand Matters keynote. For today's session, I've invited Maurice Levy, Chairman and CEO of the Publicis Group, and Dick Costolo, CEO of Twitter, to discuss the most important media event of 2013. Yes, Beyoncé's secret album release. No, seriously. We're here this morning to talk about the changes in the media and marketing landscape. But before talking about what's changed, let's take a look at what stayed the same. The year 1859, for example, was a very good year for innovation. It was also a very good year for the arts. In the arts, Charles Dickens published A Tale of Two Cities. In the sciences, Charles Darwin published On the Origin of the Species. Today, in media and marketing, just like Dickens wrote more than 150 years ago, it is the best of times and the worst of times. And just as Darwin taught us in 1859, only the adaptable survive. We forget at our peril that there are truths that endure no matter how transformed the landscape may be. In media, it has always been the programmers who held the power, which radio promotion and which primetime lineup drove the allocation of marketing dollars. Today, programmers still have the power. It's just a different type of programmer. The ones who can marry computation and communication. The ones who can create the algorithms that transforms the mountains of unstructured data into insights. Just take a look at Vanity Fair's new establishment list each year. At the top are companies' names such as Amazon, Google, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Samsung, Square. In fact, it isn't until you reach number 12 on the list that a programmer in the traditional sense of the word was even mentioned. And that was Ted Sarandos of Netflix, a platform that is anything but traditional. Building off this, today's theme is one for all and all for one. In the age of the engineer-programmer, marketers demand that in the age of the engineer-programmer, marketers demand partners that have several things: the power to attract an audience, the sophistication to target the individual, and the ability to create engagement. We might no longer be in the era of the Three Musketeers. It might now be better thought of as the era of Iron Man. It's now global scale combined with real-time targeted inventory, yet still powered by human insights. As my friend Keith Weed, the Chief Marketing Officer of Unilever, likes to say, we need both magic and logic. Or as Albert Einstein once said, information is not knowledge. That's why in developing today's agenda, we knew we had to be comprehensive. We have a panel of key media and marketing decision makers who are navigating these issues as quickly as you can say consumer adoption. But first, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage the men behind the biggest media stories in 2013. The proposed Publicis Omnicom merger and the Twitter IPO. Mon ami, Monsieur Maurice Levy, and my buddy, Mr. Dick Costello. Please join me.
I didn't know whether I was supposed to hug you or shake hands, so we kind of did a half and half.
I'll take
right.
one of each.
High five.
So, Dick, I want to start with you, and I want to go back to something that I said in the opening. And I was chatting with Andy Markowitz from GE this morning, and he reminded me of something that, as we were talking about the rate of change, and as we were talking about the opportunity to be here at the Consumer Electronics Show and kind of peer around the corner and see what's changing, what stayed the same. And Andy reminded me of something that's very clear, and I think as I say, alluded to it. At the end of the day, marketers are still looking for, I think, three things. They're looking for the right message to the right person at the right time. In the context of Twitter, you've done quite a bit and are doing quite a bit to help make that a reality even more, using the algorithms, using the technology to get that right person at the right time with the right message.
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of almost the perfect way to think about Twitter. We think about Twitter as this indispensable companion to life in the moment for our users, right? When we think about our characteristics of public, real-time, conversational, and widely distributed, that real-time live component is why we've been so successful. It's why we're the second screen for what people are watching on TV right now. And so when you think about that from a marketer's perspective, evolving the way we market to a notion of connecting in the context of what's happening right now for these specific people. The marketers who do that successfully on Twitter and think about that message as content, not an interruption to the context of the conversation people are having right now, those are the most successful marketers. So that I couldn't agree with that more.
So, Maurice, you began your career in the advertising industry, but in an area that many people might not know, but it seems to be very very intelligent based on where the world has evolved to. You began in the IT department in Publicis. You began in the what we would probably have called the computer department back then. and so when we talk about the mashup, and I chatted with Mark Benioff about this last year, when we talk about the mashup in this industry of the chief marketing officers and the chief technology and the chief information officers, you get to kind of be on both sides of that equation, having begun your career as an IT man. So your day has come.
It's about time. So it's fortunate that my days are coming when I'm about to come to the finishing line. So it's good. I had to wait for more than 40 years. By the way, Michael, I knew that. I knew that before coming, that you will not respect the briefing. You gave me a briefing. You said, this is the first thing that we will ask, and then the second, and then the third. And I see that you are going in a lot of different directions.
Well,
okay.
you understand why, because I was told once, if you don't know where you're going to end up somewhere else. So here we are.
More seriously, I think that the new technology, the new world we are in, are changing everything. it's not only the message or the way we are delivering the message, but it's also the organization and the way the companies are structured and how the decisions are made. And it is almost impossible today to work in silos and to believe that the people who are in charge of IT will continue their life in this small world, and the people who are in charge of marketing will not communicate on a regular basis. And today we see more and more of our clients who are making the decision together, and in some areas, particularly when it comes to e-commerce, but beyond e-commerce, we have meetings where there is the CMO and the CIO together. Because there are a lot of implications, not only regarding the hardware, but also what to do with the data, how to manage all these important stuff, how to make sure that privacy is protected, how to make sure that the data will not be corrupted. All this is something which is so important that it is almost impossible to think the company of tomorrow without changing quite dramatically the organization. And they believe that the old way of working that we still have today, particularly in large organizations, is something which is already outdated.
So, Maurice,
Can I just add one thing to that? I think one of the other fascinating things that we see when you think about these two organizations starting to work more together in the context of Twitter is that this notion of one-to-one marketing for so many years has been largely a mythological beast. And it's now the case that customer relationship management and advertising writ large are really coming together around true one-to-one marketing. So you'll see brands on Twitter start to engage specifically with an individual that they may have been listening to from a CRM standpoint. And the lines have really become blurred when they respond with this in the context of both a response to the user and a marketing message in fascinating ways. I mean, one of the things that we showed in our roadshow video was a brand responding to a user with a customized sort of image for that user, motivating them to do something they'd communicated about. And the reason that works now is because these platforms are public, like Twitter, that one-to-one message to that user is amplified by that user and all their followers to many, many other people. So the beauty of engaging in those one-to-one marketing relationships now is you get the ROI of all the amplification and leverage from that amplification from that individual connection.
well, and the amplification is clear, and I think it's been one of the great stories of how Twitter has played in the marketplace, which is the amplification, the ability, as you talked about with the second screen. But I want to come back to the privacy issue for a moment, Maurice, because it's obviously a big one, and I think it's interesting if we look at the calendar. CES is at the beginning of January, and I believe that the Data Privacy Day, or as in Europe they call the Data Protection Day, celebrates at the end of January. It's two sides of the same coin. You deal obviously with millions and millions of consumers to whom your agencies are creating messages. And the consumer wants these messages to be relevant, back to what I said, right message, right time, right person. But where is the line, Maurice? I mean, and how are the agencies, and again, I know it's not a silver bullet kind of a question for an answer, but that line around data privacy and the difference between this side of the pond and in Europe and Asia, but particularly focus on US versus Europe in terms of privacy.
Privacy is a very serious issue, and we should not take it lightly, and we should think very seriously about the consequence of using private data in order to commercialize a product or to communicate with the consumers or to send a message. So we have to be extremely cautious, and we have to take this very, very seriously. The problem is that today the issue is even more complicated thanks to Mr. Snowden and the fact that a lot of people have discovered the role of NSA and the access that NSA has to a lot of information. people understand the security aspect, and people are extremely mindful about the fact that we have to be extremely cautious with all the information which are flowing. And if we look at the difference between the US and Europe, and I will start with France, there is one big difference, that in 1978, there has been the creation of what we call la Commission Nationale Informatique et Liberté, which is an independent body, an independent agency whose mission is to make sure that the private data are protected. You have to understand that in Europe, there are a lot of things that you cannot communicate. For example, I have been shocked personally when the first time I had to look at some information that we were giving officially here in the US. We have to give information about race, religion, etc. This is forbidden in Europe. You can't do that. You can't do that maybe because of what happened during the war, and building information system based on very private information regarding the person is something which is taken extremely seriously. And this has taught us during all these years how to manage this kind of information without crossing the line of what could be a prejudice for the person. So we have developed a lot of systems and approaches. We have this body who is telling us what we can do, what we can't, and which is also informing the people on a regular basis what they can accept and what they should not accept. And as of today, we see some important merits in gathering the data because we do that. This is avoiding invasion, delivering the right message, as you said, to the right person, and avoiding to have tons of messages which are flowing around because you don't know to who you have to address that message. So the fact that you can do it properly, and the option, obviously, to opt out. So all this is working extremely well. There is no big issues. The French system has been adopted by the European Union Commission, and it is today the system in Europe. We do hope that we will find a consensus between Europe and the US, because it's extremely important that, one, we have access to information. It is important not only for the marketers, but also for the consumers. Otherwise, what will happen is that they will get a lot of spams, and this is not what they want. And they will get the wrong message at the wrong time regarding the wrong product. And this is also what they don't want. And it will cost much more to the advertisers. So all in all, it is in our common interest to find ways to really very seriously monitor this information and make sure that we have an access to the right information, and that we don't use information wrongly.
Well, I just had a couple quick things to that. I think that, you know, if you separate it into transmission of private data and then how it's used and so forth, I think it's also important to just highlight on the transmission side, you know, all of the data over HTTP certainly should, at least at a minimum, be transmitted via HTTPS. I mean, so that has to be something that everybody goes and does. There are companies like Google and we who've gone farther and implemented forward security, and I encourage those kinds of things. But I think on the use side, trust, it boils down to trust, right? So we've implemented Do Not Track. We've, as Maurice mentioned, you know, right on the very first page of your settings there, you can opt out of tailored ads, tailored content. And it just has to be, it has to be, but it has, so as long as it's clear to users in simple language in one place, here's where to go, you know, opt out of that. And you implement clearly things like Do Not Track, and you talk about how you do them, then, you know, you just need to be clear and direct with your users.
But rough justice, rough numbers, obviously nothing, you know, nothing that anybody would hold anybody to, but percentage-wise.
Yeah, I don't actually, to be perfectly frank, I don't actually know what the percentage of people who have opted out of tailored content or tailored ads is on Twitter. But it's right there on the very first page of your settings on your profile.
Your view would be that it would be a small percentage, Maurice?
Yes. For the time being, what we are seeing, and particularly in areas where this is something which is in place since many years, you look at what's happening in France or in Europe, it's below 5%. Because it's also, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the consumer. They don't want to miss good information. They don't want to miss an entertaining content. They don't want to miss a relationship with the brand. They don't want to miss an offer. So what they don't want is to be overloaded with a lot of information or the wrong messages. What they don't want is to be harassed, but to get the right message at the right time and deliver it in the nice and emotional manner, which is the right one for them. This is something which is working extremely well. And as I said, there is something like 95% who have not opted out. And they are absolutely aware of the fact that they can.
So Dick, Twitter's a unique circumstance, a unique company. I mean, it's arguable that you're a media platform, you're a technology platform, and you're a communication platform. I mean, you're all three.
Yeah.
Where do you see how do you define the company, or do you try to, amongst those three pillars, or do you say, great, we're all of the above?
I think that I go back to what I said at the beginning and define the company in the context of the role or the service that we provide to users, being that indispensable companion to life in the moment. And I look again to the characteristics of the platform that in aggregate are unique to Twitter, that combination of public, real-time, conversational, and then widely distributed. Billions of tweets, not just displayed on owned and operated Twitter properties, but across the web and mobile ecosystem, to say nothing of television every quarter. So those four characteristics, in service to being that indispensable companion to life in the moment, are the way we think about the service we're providing. And then the business flows from that. So when we think about the services that we're providing to advertisers and marketers and Maurice's teams, it's all about, again, going back to that very first thing I said, how do we help you connect in the context of the conversation these people are having right now, so that it doesn't feel like an interruption to the point about when you provide relevant, specific content in context, you do end up seeing these lower opt-out rates.
So as we talk about, back to where we started, the importance of the proposed transaction for Publicis and Omnicom, presumably coming together in the first half of this year, and Twitter's IPO, which was wildly successful. Congratulations on that, Dick, and in terms of not only the marketplace reaction, but to the way in which it was managed. Publicis and Twitter announced a big partnership in the fourth quarter, or maybe the third quarter of last year. How's that partnership structured, to the degree you can talk about it, and what was really the underpinnings? Is it about a better deal? Is it about the sharing of information? Is it about, God forbid, a press release?
I'll tell you, and this is, I realize, this may sound a cliche, but I couldn't mean it more sincerely. It's about really trying to develop a partnership that instead of a transactional relationship. And in order to do that, you have to start to think strategically over the arc of time about how you're going to work together with your mutual customers to enable them to connect in the context of a conversation. How do you help customers understand things like everyday moments, right? So one of the questions we'll get from customers is, okay, well, the blackout at the Super Bowl, that's not going to happen, for me tomorrow when I need to be communicating with my customers. But there are all these everyday moments. They happen over and over and over again. Memes that rise up on Twitter day after day after day. And so this relationship and partnership is about working together to help our customers, again, over the arc of time, understand how to communicate in the context of these everyday moments that happen all the time on the platform.
Before answering this question, I would like to come back to the question that you put before regarding if Twitter is a media, is a platform, is a technology company or whatever. And when you look at all the technology platforms that you see around the world, and particularly the largest one, they are not only a media, they are not only a content, they are not only one thing, they are many things all together. You look at Google, is it a search engine, an encyclopedia, a display system? Tomorrow with Android and Motorola, what will happen, etc., with the Google glasses. Today, everything is blurred, and that is probably the most important lesson that we have to take about the last few years. We are in a world which is blurring. When we made our first agreement with Google, I know that a lot of people, and particularly some of my dearest competitors, were considering that we were crazy to do that. We thought that this was the right thing to do for our clients. The same with Twitter. It is the right thing to do to better understand how to use this platform, which is not one single media. It's a complex story. How to use it for the best interest of our client. How to understand the behavior of the consumer, of the subscribers. How to interact with them in the best possible way. And that's the reason why we have made the first deal with Google, the first deal with Facebook, etc., etc. And we are extremely pleased with this agreement with Twitter. I think it is extremely important that we, the agencies, we think first about our clients, that we make sure that what we are doing, and for Christ's sake, we should remember this every single day, at every single moment, we are there to build brands, to develop these brands through a lot of different access to the consumer, different content possibilities, different systems, and all this is leading to a much more complex approach today than it was yesterday. And to go back to the very first question that you put regarding the fact that I'm meeting the guy that I was some 40 years ago, was young and handsome, and not old and close to I see.
I'll let the audience judge that, Maurice. I think you're doing just fine.
Yes, they will judge. I think that what is extremely interesting nowadays is that everything is blended. We cannot say that we can build a communication system for a client only through Twitter, or only through Facebook, or only through Google. We need also to be on TV. We need to be on distributed video. We need to be in a very complex system, which is requiring much more imagination than knowledge. That's the reason why I'm so fond of the quote of Albert Einstein, which says that the imagination is more important than knowledge. And that is where we, the advertising agencies, with our creative people, with our way of thinking, which is very different from the other ones, we can bring something that others can't.
So,
Can I just say you've made a lovely little art installation with your note cards there.
see, it's all about the look and
I
feel.
wanted to make that observation.
It's a user interface.
I told you, don't believe that he will follow this.
So
You can't rely on
So
that.
guys, I'm going to follow one question that I did write in advance, which is in 140 characters or less. What does the Publicis Omnicom merger mean to you, Dick, first as a media seller, a media partner? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think that's two great groups that we've been working with successfully already, bringing together when they come together, it will dramatically facilitate that notion of creative as content. It has to be the case. I went over my tweet length, sorry. But I actually do this all the time, and then I have to backspace and get to 140. So it has to be the case in order to connect in the context of the conversation that it's content that these brands are leading with. And it's all about the content. And so I think that merger is going to facilitate this because the combination will facilitate that combination of content creation and the creative groups.
And it'll be interesting because we, as you know, we have some chief marketing officers and other folks joining us after this conversation. But Dick, I want to just, and I love to tell this story, when we did that very, very first digital journey that we put together under the context of digital literacy back 4 years ago, Twitter was invited to participate. And considering where Twitter is today, as you may recall, we invited Adam Bain to join us for a speed dating opportunity because Twitter wasn't big enough to have their own section reserved for a couple of hours. And Adam jumped 20 minutes at this table and 20 minutes at that table. And you know, I'm proud to say we got to be there at the very beginning, and it's been an extraordinary growth curve. But what the question goes to the fact that client direct conversation, and this is a challenge in the industry, and there's always been this word that was used a couple of years ago a lot around disintermediation. And so the partnership that you create with Publicis or the partnership that you might create with other holding companies to facilitate, as Maurice said, better understanding and less transactional relationship, more strategic relationship. You still have that, and again, we'll hear from Jim Farley and Andy England and some others shortly, who they want to have a direct conversation with you as well as being respectful of the agency relationship. How is that sorted through the partnerships that you make?
Look, I mean, I'll answer briefly, and then Maurice should jump in. My brief answer is we have a relationship of trust that's based on trust. So, you know, I know Jim and I know Andy, and we have conversations, and I think those are great. And we have the same conversations with the agency folks that are our partners about those conversations that we've had, right? I literally will do things like have a conversation with Jim and then have a follow-up conversation. Have a conversation with the McDonald's folks and then have a follow-up conversation here. Have a conversation with the Verizon folks and then follow up with the agency. So those kinds of conversations, as long as we're all being providing each other context and synthesis for what they are, I think that's great.
And transparency.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean by, so I'll just briefly say, I prefer the terms context and synthesis over transparency because it's not about just, here's the transcript, right? It's about, here's the kind of stuff we talked about, and my takeaway from that is this, and what do you think, right? That's what I mean by context and synthesis. It's not just about, here's a recording of the phone call we just had.
I fail to understand why this is a question. I'm sorry to say that this way. I think that first, the agency do not own, any agency on earth doesn't own the client. And to have the idea that they will put the client in a closed environment and forbid the client to have access to the media is something of another world. I don't know. Maybe this exists in Siberia. I'm not sure even that it does exist in Russia. It is just normal to collaborate. The first thing that I learned when I joined the advertising world is that it was un trépied. Sorry for the word. I do not know how to...
Your French pronunciation is magnificent, by the way.
Yes, I know. I
for a guy
spend a lot of time.
That's right. For a guy from
rehearse.
Brooklyn, you're doing pretty well.
I spend a lot of time to rehearse trépied. And this was my very first lesson. A trépied is like a tripod, is trois pieds, 3 legs. The client, the media, and the agency, with 1/4 very important party with the consumer, who is not part of the contract, but he is the most important party. So when we are making these kind of deals, it is not for transaction and not for transparency, because in any way, we have to be transparent. This is a given. This is not something which is to be discussed. It is for building the best solution for the client. And it's like if you decide that when you will, and maybe you do that, I don't know, when you go dancing with your wife, you go in a desert and you dance alone in order that she doesn't see that there are some other people, some other men who are a little bit brighter than you, which is very difficult to find.
I think we're getting
Maybe
into a personal area here.
Maybe a bit taller.
Taller is easy. Taller is easy.
No. But you cannot have this kind of thinking. You have to be open. And if you look, for example, at what happened in the last days and what will continue to happen in the CES, I will take just one example, which is Starcom and Laura Desmond. They have not only brought a lot of publicists people here and Starcom and MediaVest people, but they have also organized with client a lot of session with Microsoft, with Twitter, with Facebook, with a lot of people in order to make sure that they have access to the owners, to the platform, in order to make sure that they understand the new world. It is in our interest that they understand the new world. And if we can help them understanding this slightly better, it is in our common interest. So this idea of selfishness, I will protect my world and I will try to be in the monopoly of the contact with the platform or with the media is just not working. It's a ridiculous concept. I'm sorry to say that. I'm not saying that you have implied this, because I would never dare to think that you are saying something which is ridiculous. But I'm just saying that this concept, oof, oh la la, mon Dieu, this concept is not working in this world.
Well, Maurice, thank you for that. Dick, I have one final question before.
You already said one final.
Yeah, but this is personal, and it's still fresh. So in December, you said to Matt Lauer you had a Christmas wish list. There were 3 people you wanted: Melissa McCarthy, Tina Fey, and Amy Poehler on Twitter. How'd we do?
So the beautiful thing is that the Golden Globes are coming right up, and we have some really cool integrations with the Golden Globes that I'm super excited about. So
well, we'll look forward on Sunday.
Great.
Maurice, Dick, thank you so much.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to welcome to the stage Scott Dorsey, the CEO of Salesforce ExactTarget Marketing Cloud, Andy England, the Executive Vice President and CMO of Miller Coors, Carolyn Everson, the VP of Global Marketing Solutions at Facebook, and Jim Farley, the Executive Vice President of Global Marketing, Sales and Services, Lincoln and Ford Motor Company. Please join me on the stage. I feel like I'm having a Michael Bay moment. Ah, there you are.
Hello.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. So let me start with Andy. Andy, the question that I asked Maurice and Dick, and I did ask it with a specific purpose in mind, because what I wanted to hear is from the marketer's perspective, and not that they're not marketers, but I wanted to hear from the marketer's perspective, the opinion on that conversation, because there is, as articulate as Maurice was and Dick in articulating their position on that interaction directly with clients, there's still a delicate balance that goes on. And in fairness, when Dick said we have those meetings and we then share the information, that sharing of information is very much at the core of because those meetings are happening. As a marketer, how do you navigate that space? How do you navigate the space working with the great agencies that you do work with, and yet also having the direct kinds of conversations that you've had, for so long with the media partners. From a Miller Coors perspective, how does that play out?
Well, it's a good question. I think, let me start by saying that I sell beer for a living. So
Anybody have a problem with that here in Las Vegas?
And this is relatively humble work. And so I don't worry too much about that kind of stuff. And I would argue that, frankly, that stuff hasn't changed very much. Because it probably won't surprise you to know that I also have a relationship with NBC and CBS and Fox and ESPN, despite the fact that we rely on agencies to complete our negotiations with them. I think it's important that we as marketers understand the media platforms and understand the people that run them and what their vision is for them and where they're going. And so, for me, that doesn't really change. It's just got, there's a bigger and more interesting tapestry now. There's folks like Dick and Carolyn and others who we can develop relationships as well and understand from their point of view where marketing is going, where consumers are going, and most importantly, where beer drinkers are going.
So, Jim, I would ask you the same question. Ford, one of the largest marketers in the world, probably top 5, I'm going to guess, without looking at a rank order, but certainly in top 10 marketers in the world in terms of the spend across the globe. And you've got those direct relationships. And as well, here at the Consumer Electronics Show, I think Ford was one of the very earliest, what I would characterize as non-endemic companies to be here in a big way. And your CEO has given keynotes here, and so that connectivity for you as a marketer to media sellers on the one hand and to electronics manufacturers on the other hand, this is something you do very directly, and yet you as well have extraordinarily deep and wonderful agency relationships. How do you navigate that from a marketer's perspective?
Well, I think the question comes at a really interesting time, obviously.
Right person, right time, right message. There you go.
And the reason is because we're going through this kind of disruptive, in a positive way, time where we're trying to figure out these new ad platforms for all their potential. So I can't think of a more important time for us to have a direct relationship with the media companies who are themselves developing their own ad platform. And at the same time, figuring out for us as a car company how the experience in the car will also change because of their product. They're not only media companies, but Twitter and Facebook and others are also going to be in the car, right? So I have to tell you that I think it's incredibly important to have an equally healthy relationship and respectful, trustful relationship with your agency, and a really high level of engagement during these times when things are changing, when people are learning, because those best practices come from all over different directions, and Carolyn can help us with that.
Well, you used the word trust, and that brings me to Scott. Last year, Mark Benioff, your chairman, sat on this stage and talked about the trust revolution, and in fact used an example of a car as what a great marketing opportunity the automobile is because of the constant interaction. But that trust revolution is at the core of sort of Salesforce and where it's going as an overall company. And now with the acquisition of ExactTarget at the end of last year, congratulations on that, Scott. The Marketing Cloud is here to stay. I mean, that trust revolution underscores Salesforce as a company and their view, and again, the Marketing Cloud that you run now.
Absolutely, Michael. We are very focused on helping organizations connect with their customers in a whole new way. And in a whole new way really means one-to-one relationships. And I think Dick did an excellent job actually of describing the convergence of advertising and CRM. And CRM, customer relationship management, comprises sales, service, and marketing, and really managing every touch point you have with the customer through their journey. And trust is really at the foundation of marketing relationships. Trust is at the foundation of permission-based marketing. We started ExactTarget 12 years ago, really right on the heels of Seth Godin writing the book Permission Marketing, and a short time after Peppers and Rogers wrote The One-to-One Future. And here we are today, where all of it is really, really happening in an extraordinary way. But I believe that marketing is about relationships, and relationships are always built on that foundation of trust.
And as you look at that foundation of trust, and again, the Marketing Cloud is taking what Salesforce did for computing and bringing it to marketing. And again, on this stage last year, we talked about that. Mark announced it, and then we said to the marketers, okay, well, you've just heard from the man behind the cloud. What does all this mean to you? What are you finding the receptivity from marketers to the concept around the Marketing Cloud? Do they even understand it on the one hand, generally? And once they understand it, how are they activating?
Oh, feedback's been extraordinary, Michael. I believe, all marketers want to build a closer relationship with their customer. And not only marketers, but CEOs and senior level management realize that to fulfill their strategic vision, they have to get closer to the customer, and marketing is really the vehicle to do it. It starts with your opening comment, sending the right message to the right person at the right time. I would also add through the right digital channel. And now with connected products and connected devices, we've got a really positive explosion of channels in which marketers can connect and build and deepen those relationships. So the feedback has really been exceptional. And at Salesforce, we have extraordinary resources, and we're very dialed into this convergence of cloud, mobile, social, and what it means for marketers. And it's an extraordinary time for marketing.
Thank you. Carolyn, welcome to our third anniversary on a stage at CES. This is our third time doing this. So I'm curious, over these years, Carolyn, what's changed, what's stayed the same here at CES? I mean, you've looked at it through different eyes. You've been on this stage with Viacom and with Facebook, and as we talk about social, I'm not saying Facebook is all social, but it defines social. I mean, it's the underpinnings of what people talk about when they talk about social. From your perspective, CES, through the eyes you looked at 7 or 8 or 10 years ago, and now today, what's changed? What's stayed the same?
Well, I think CES, I think there are a few moments throughout the year that are incredibly important gatherings for the industry. And I think CES really kicks it off because the spirit around it is all around innovation. And at the pace at which everything is changing and how fast consumer behavior is changing, it is incumbent upon all of us to actually put ourselves in the center and really put the consumer in the center. And I think CES offers us the opportunity to see what is going to excite and delight the consumer, and then we can figure out as marketers and as platforms, how do we best deliver that message to the consumer? And so it's become a critical week, I think, for marketers, for agencies, for technology partners, and really back to your question early on, it is, I thought the way Maurice described it with the sort of three-peg stool and the consumer really in the center was really the core message. It actually sometimes is a lot more partners than that, right? We have Salesforce as a key partner of ours, we have traditional agencies, we have technology partnerships now, and I think the way of working in the past, which was very more siloed, it was much more about competition and everyone having their space. The new world order is complete collaboration and being very open to doing what's best for the consumer. And I think CES is a great gathering place for that. By the way, thank you for having me back. And we were a little bit delayed backstage because I had to give Maurice a Facebook pin because I noticed he was wearing a Twitter on his lapel.
That's good.
So there was a little slight delay backstage.
There's equal opportunity.
So apologies for that.
That's good. Did you put it on the same lapel, or did you?
I didn't put it on myself. He was taking care of that.
Jim, I think last year or the year before, the big buzz at CES was the connected car. I mean, and it still is. And everywhere you look, there's great displays of what's happening in the automobiles. But the buzz this year seems to be on wearables. And Andy and I chatted about this yesterday. But I'm curious, what do you think the wearables revolution is going to mean to you as a marketer? People aren't buying cars necessarily based on, as Andy said, the wearables may work when somebody walks up to a bar to order a drink and he can communicate with that person. Do you see that as something that's going to change the way you communicate with your consumers? Because again, a car is a different kind of decision, tree than purchasing a beer.
Sure. No, wearables are a really great step forward, obviously, for just access to the technology. But the way I think about wearables and the impact in marketing is really how they'll impact the in-car experience. As an industry, we've been experimenting with heads-up display for a long time. And for example, a wearable glass is really a game changer. Do you put that cost embedded in the car, or do you count on the customers doing it? And the reason why that's important is our industry is literally littered with bad decisions around not futuring consumer products. We were in the phone business. Remember those huge phones in the 80s? You know, it didn't work out. We didn't future the mobile expansion. And so the car experience inside, because our platforms take 6-7 years to, you know, are just not anywhere near where they need to be in terms of running mobile applications in the car in display mode very effortlessly. So frankly, the most important thing for us in our industry is now to not make the same mistake again and go into competition with wearables if in the end the customer's going to wear them in the car and use them because it's going to be lower cost. Frankly, it fits into the rest of their life, and if you put the customer at the center, why would you ask them to invest in a whole nother similar technology in the car?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because when people have asked me, and I throw this out to the group of you, you know, gee, Michael, when we were fortunate enough to help the Consumer Electronics Association create the Brand Matters platform, people said, well, what's the attraction? Why are, you know, at the end of the day, why are the brands really coming to the electronics show? And to Carolyn's point, I said, I've reminded people the first word of this is consumer electronics, so they're all in the consumer business as well, so that's number one, and I think you can't lose sight of that. But number two, it's to have that conversation earlier. You know, we talked about this in the context of the entertainment industry. When people talked about Madison and Vine, it was, you know, that conversation between content creators and marketers starting earlier. And then with the digital journeys, it was to get the conversation between marketers and the digital companies to start earlier. CES was around getting the conversation between the device manufacturers and the marketers to start earlier. So I think that's right in the sweet spot of what you were saying. Are you seeing that happen?
Yes, I mean, I can't count how many car companies had Google Glass demonstrations here, and you know, that includes all the things that we're going to be wearing. You know, we spend an incredible amount of money in a car with display technology. Why would we waste that money if customers are already going to invest it in another part of their life? And it will have a profound impact on the experience. We have multiple screens today. If a heads-up display becomes a real customer, popular for customers, we got to make sure it works really well in the car.
Andy, same question to you. I mean, we talked about wearables, you know, at the top of that question, but you made a very valid point yesterday, just in terms of how that wearable technology will inform the kinds of decisions you need to make as a marketer.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I'm more agnostic than Jim is, because, you know, obviously we're not investing the same kind of technology in our beer yet. But you know, what I will say is,
wearable beer. I've had that happen to me a few times.
I understand. I mean, if you look at how, you know, people use our
usually
product,
a wearable martini in my case, but I'm sorry.
I understand. This is how people use our product, right? If they're, whether they're sitting on a sofa at home, imagine this were a beer, and imagine this were an iPhone. One is true. They're not far away from each other. They're really not far away from each other, whether you're in a bar, whether you're sitting on your sofa, and you know, these two things are happening together, whether you're watching a sports event, whether you're tweeting, whether you're with friends, you know, these two things are very close together. So I'm somewhat agnostic, because if it moves from here onto the wrist, for example, then so be it. It's our job to, you know, understand where the consumer's going and go there too. But one way or another, they're going to be connected while they're in their bar. They're going to be connected while they're watching the NFL playoff this weekend. It's just
and hopefully there'll be a Miller Coors in their hand, so
one would hope so.
It's all good.
I think I would just add, Michael, it's that smartphone that is the ultimate connection point, and that's what's fueling so much of this transformation. Is we're in a world today with about 1.5 billion smartphones. It's projected that only a couple years out, there'll be 5 billion smartphones in the world, and consumers are hyper-connected. So not only is there a supercomputer in everyone's hand, it's in their hand every minute of the day. And that's really what's fueling all the apps and all the innovation and the connected products. And marketers have really an amazing opportunity to really re-envision what that relationships look like. And in many, many senses, every company today is a software company. Every company is building apps. Every company are building connected products that build a deeper relationship. And it really gives a marketer a unique opportunity to get to know their customers better than ever before. Because you think about data drives relevance, and relevance drives results and conversion. Data often has been demographic data, maybe purchase data, maybe web behavioral data. Now, you have the physical behavioral data, whether it's the Nike Fuel Band or Fitbit, or one of our customers, Oakley, just launched the connected ski goggles. You start to get real-world, physical, behavioral data, and you start to get a really rich profile of your customers, and it really informs what kind of content they're interested in, how do you engage them deeper, and then that really drives, more business and deeper relationships and better loyalty in the end.
And to that end, Scott, the connected world you talk about, the Internet of Things, the world that we are truly living in now, so much of where Salesforce was, less exact target, but now Salesforce, as one, was B2B, and now this conversation is really moving into a B2C conversation. How's that changing the way you look at things? Because, again, it's a different conversation.
Oh, you're absolutely right, Michael. The lines between B2B and B2C marketing are really blurring in a really profound way, and it all centers around that consumer or customer being at the center of all activity. So the whole notion of marketing automation and one-to-one marketing has lived in the B2B world. Now it's possible at B2C scale, and that's opening up enormous possibilities. But we are really seeing, whether it's B2B or B2B2C or B2C, that the techniques, the technology...
Can you say that quickly 5 times?
I can, as long as I haven't had too much of Andy's product. All of those are really coming together in a very meaningful way.
So thank you for that. Guys, I want to jump into a question that I certainly asked Dick, and I kind of sidestepped asking Maurice just because of respectful of the process of a deal that's not fully closed yet. But so Publicis Omnicom merger. Each of you would have a different view of that. This is a question to the panel in general. I'll start with Carolyn, actually. Carolyn, what does that mean to you? Because at the end of the day, when John Wren and Maurice Levy announced their deal, they said it was for many reasons, but one was technology and the scale that is on the other side of the equation from them, whether it's Facebook or Google or Twitter or Microsoft or Amazon or Apple. The scale is so humongous on the one side. This is a place to sort of level the playing field. What does it mean to you in terms of, obviously there's one less player on the field, but that's not the question. The question is, what does it mean to you in terms of the day-to-day business? And you've looked at the world as a seller and as a buyer, so how does this impact your world?
Well, I think from a meta point, there is, even though we're talking up here about wearable devices and all the things we're super excited about, and many people that happen to be at CES are on the cutting edge of digital technology and marketing and building brands in a digital world, the truth of the matter is that we are still so early stage as an industry. And we have a lot more work to do. And one of the most important things that we have to do is almost replumb the system and rebuild the infrastructure around how media is going to get bought and planned for in a digital environment. And so when you pull together Publicis and Omnicom together, we have an opportunity, I think, to work a lot more efficiently with one group to get the plumbing worked out so that their teams can think about utilizing all of the data sources across all media, getting things like multi-touch attribution in place so that we can make really smart decisions about what is actually relevant and what's working for the consumer. I think that's going to be a really efficient way to work together, and so we're really excited about that. At the end of the day, what it really comes down to is how fast can we change all of the systems that we have in place, meaning the talent that we have. Do we have the right talent in place to think differently in a digital environment? Do we have the right infrastructure to make it easy for the planners and buyers to execute? And do we have the right creative in an environment where the cadence of creativity is at such a higher demand than it was in the past, where we need to constantly think about how do we create enough good content to get in all these different forms? I think it's going to be very, very beneficial for us, so we're looking forward to working with them. And they've both agency holding companies have been fantastic partners, and we fully expect that to continue going forward.
So Jim, from your perspective, Ford's got a lot of scale. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't need someone else's scale. You bring your own scale to the party, and you generally live outside of the Publicis Omnicom world. Yes. As WPP, I think, is your primary global partner. Does it matter to you? Is it just interesting fodder for a conversation? Because again, you have your own scale, and you don't operate in that environment. Does it matter? Does it change the world for Ford? And then, look outside of Ford. What do you think it means to the to the marketplace?
I'm sure it will change a lot. But I guess from our standpoint, we have one global agency. So we're very unusual as a brand, all the way through the 3 tiers across the world. And we're very intentional about that. So actually, my comment would be more an observation about the value in, which is we found that the most important thing is to get the diversity and the expertise within a large organization down to that brand manager in a specific country is the value of the opportunity. Because we have one agency, our creative is developed in kind of an outsourced way within that agency. So every execution is different, and that process is really the value of using WPP, not the size of WPP. And so my observation is it's really more the process and how things work within that agency that dictate whether there's value in that or type of organizational structure or not.
Well, and to your point, the Ford WPP relationship is unique in that it's one of the few that really, has that length of time attached to it, and as well the exclusivity of it. So it's interesting to have an observer's point of view. Andy, you're in a different situation because you work across several holding companies.
Yeah.
And so how does it impact you? Does it? And just in general, you have tremendous scale, but obviously not the same scale as Ford, but you're a pretty important marketer across the globe. You have responsibility for the U.S., but Miller Coors as a brand across the globe is pretty large.
It's interesting, right? It's as you say, we have partnerships, frankly, within all 4 of the major holding companies. So we are, interestingly, on the WPP side, we created
my kind of girl. It's all good.
Yeah, we created Cavalry very much in the model of Team Detroit, because we wanted a customized solution that worked for the Coors family of brands, and we're very happy with that. We also work with Saatchi's. We work with ARC and and Digitas and Bromley. So we have multiple Publicis partners. We have Integer is a very important partner of ours as part of Omnicom, and of course Initiative on the IPG side. And so we have multiple agencies relationships, and I think frankly it's partly because of where we came from when Miller and Coors came together and the relationships were there. And frankly, I do consider it somewhat messy, but the world keeps ever changing. And I think the challenge that I think Publicis Omnicom is going to have, they're not going to have financial challenges. I mean, we went through a very similar merger when we merged Miller and Coors, you could argue, with very similar synergy goals. And I think that scale is going to help their financials, and I'm quite sure Maurice and John Wren are doing what's right for their shareholders. What I do think, though, is that we live in an interesting time where scale isn't everything. I think, and we operate as marketers of scale brands, like obviously a Miller Lite or Coors Light, but what's not often known is that we also own everything from Blue Moon and Leinenkugels to Peroni and Keystone and Pilsner Urquell and Grolsch and Reds and like Molson and Foster's. I could go on. We have a wonderful portfolio of products, and the real trick is how do we get the right partnerships to maximize each of those brands as an individual brand within our portfolio? And I think scale is helpful in some areas, but individualized solutions are helpful in others. And in many ways, I think what's going on from an agency point of view parallels what's going on from a consumer point of view. Consumers want a tailored solution in certain categories and certain occasions, and at other times, they're very happy with a cost-effective other solution.
So Andy, we're talking about scale, but I want to bring it back down to the local neighborhood. There's nothing more local than your local bar and your local supermarket and the local bodega where you're purchasing beer, and you're a local business with a global scale, but you're a local business with all the technology and all the capability, and we talked about wearables, and maybe 2014 is the year of mobile finally. Certainly seems to be so at Facebook. So, maybe it's happening. But you're in a local business. How is all this data, as my friend Shelley Zallis likes to say, how's all the junk in your trunk getting translated to all this information getting translated to make the local decisions that you need to make.
Yeah, well, we're in an extraordinarily local business, and just to emphasize that, if you look at my colleagues here on the stage, I'm sure Carolyn, being in the New York area, is very familiar with Brooklyn Brewery, and I'm sure Jim's very familiar with Bell's in Michigan, and Three Floyds is probably not a stranger to Scottsworld. So in each particular market, we definitely compete on a local basis, and we have to bring something relevant to that marketplace, because I will tell you that in general, people drink alcoholic beverages that are for someone like them. And being for someone like them, being appealing to an individual at a time to create a mass market business is very much the challenge, and that's where so many of these solutions come in. And I think, you were talking about wearables earlier. We have such an opportunity to learn more about what we consider our key beer drinker. That guy who sort of drives our business, about his behavior, about his choices. There are some things we do that are something of a no-brainer. Sponsoring the Chicago Bears in Chicago, probably a pretty good idea, right? But when you
wear a warm coat.
Absolutely, well, particularly now. But I think we have so much opportunity to get so much more granular about that and really understand, what's happening at a local level.
So there's been a lot of talk this week about the polar vortex. And, here we are at the center of the electronics vortex. What's jumped off the floor? Have you been, Scott, I know you got in late, so I don't know if you've been on the floor yet, but what are you hearing? What's the buzz you're hearing about inside the vortex here at the Consumer Electronics Show? Have you picked up any buzz yet on what's hip and hop? And
the polar vortex is what held me back from not getting to the CES vortex any sooner. So coming from the middle part of the country, the buzz that I've heard so far is really about, it's about wearable technology, about connected devices, connected homes, connected automobiles, and it's just so exciting. And I think it comes back to just innovation, speed of creative thought, how all devices will be Wi-Fi enabled, whether it's a connected crock pot, which just got a lot of bit of chatter over the last couple of days, which is exciting, or fitness and wearable devices. I think what is really, really exciting is that the consumer is at the center of this wave of innovation, and our lives are going to improve in really, really interesting ways. And technology is the ultimate enabler. And it's that interesting convergence of mobile and social and cloud all coming together to drive a massive amount of innovation with products that really, really get your attention, and I think really have a chance to improve your lives.
So Carolyn, back to the mobile question. And again, Facebook took a lot of heat in the marketplace early on after the original IPO about G-Mobile, and then all of a sudden, it lit up. The mobile started to move. What changed it? Was it just the demand was there and it just hadn't caught up, or what was it? Was it messaging? Was it just what do you attribute it to?
Well, mobile has been the best thing for our business. And I think that people maybe 2 years ago didn't understand, and maybe we didn't understand what it was going to do to our business, because at that time we were not a mobile-first company. The company started in Mark's dorm room. It was a desktop company. And Mark fundamentally changed the entire company and repivoted, retrained every engineer. We had to rebuild all of our apps. We had made a very big bet on HTML5. It turned out to be potentially the wrong bet, and we had to build true, excellent native apps with iOS and Android and the other platforms, and really delight the consumer. Because if you go back 2 years, and those of you that use the Facebook app, it wasn't very good. It crashed, and we had a lot of complaints, and that's not what we need to do. We need to delight the consumer every step of the way. And so when Mark repivoted the company and made it very clear that our entire future was going to be based on mobile, the psychology inside of the company changed literally practically overnight. I think what we didn't realize at the time was also how important it was going to be in a marketing sense. And so when I think about my value to Jim and Andy and to others, it is mobile is the closest thing to our consumer that we all have right now. You saw Andy's description of holding a beer and having the phone. It's with us practically 24 hours a day. I needed to take the Facebook platform and make sure that I could get marketers to be the closest thing to the consumer. And once we opened up Newsfeed and allowed marketers to get their message in, Cavalry, one of Andy's agencies that he mentioned earlier with the Polar Vortex, they just distributed beautiful creative on Facebook in the last 48 hours where, Coors Light owns cold as one of their core brand attributes. And it's just a quick weather map. It's perfect. It's like little snowflakes, and it's a perfect content, real time, and it gets out there. And so being able to do that, being able to do the things that we've done with Jim on revealing the Mustang reveal on Instagram and on Facebook, mobile is the most important thing that we are going to see, in my view, in our lifetime as marketers. And as excited as we are about 3D printing, which I am, and the wearable devices, we're all running around with them, there's so many great things that are on the floor and are happening, but the mega point that there are more mobile phones than there are toothbrushes in the world, and we are going to see an entirely different global community that's going to be connected, never through a desktop, but only through the mobile device, and that's how we as marketers are going to have to reach our consumers. That's to me, they're going to be the story. It's the story last year. It's going to be the story for many more years to come. And for Facebook, it's been absolutely the best thing that's ever happened to our business.
Ironically, I mentioned to you earlier, I was fortunate enough to be in Kenya over the holidays, and Kenya is at the forefront of mobile payments.
Yes.
Amazingly. People get paid on their mobile devices. They pay for everything on their mobile devices. They're way ahead of anybody else, partly, as I understand it, because of what Vodafone did to bring that platform.
But very much to the point of why marketers and mobile device manufacturers need to be talking earlier, because if that's how you're going to buy the goods and services, you want to make sure the marketer has a voice in what you're creating. So I think that's very much to the core. So let's talk about that voice and switch from mobile to just pure social for a moment. So Jim, to you as a marketer, you have the most extraordinary opportunity today, I think, to communicate with your consumers. Maurice and Dick talked about it, and you actually have a one-to-one opportunity to communicate with your consumers via the social platforms and just via the technology that exists. Are you using it to the fullest? I mean, where do you think there's opportunity? And again, you don't have to be specific to Ford unless you're comfortable doing that, but for a marketer, where is the best opportunity to make sure that that conversation is meaningful and not sort of just, okay, yes, you get a tweet, you get a message, you respond to it, but how's that being, maximized? Let me say it that way.
On the marketing, the traditional promotion side of marketing, I think we're just kind of beginning, frankly. I mean, we don't have the infrastructure. We're just beginning to really deliver on that one-to-one. We need electronic storefronts. We need digital CRM platforms. So actually, for me, the most important one-to-one relationship for a car company has been underutilized fully. I mean, we do not have a one-to-one relationship with the drivers of our cars once they buy our car. So the connected car, when I look back, I'm sure, and talk to my grandkids, it's going to be electrification and the connected car. The car is not connected. We have so much data about customers we're not using. By the way, we know everyone who breaks the law. We know exactly when you do it because we have a GPS sensor in your car. We know where you are, and we know how fast you're driving. But seriously, we don't supply that data to other people either.
So when I go to the bar to get a beer, you can, no.
But yes, but seriously, just think about the opportunity if you're running a stadium and you know about all the cars heading your way. You can resource your parking lot differently if that data was available, right, from all those cars, because the cars show up before the people do. We've really never thought about that one-to-one relationship inside the car or with other businesses. To me, that's the big change that's going to happen in our industry, that one-to-one relationship in the car. We don't have it. We need it. It's very transactional today and such a huge opportunity.
Well, and Scott, that was what I kind of alluded to at the beginning when Mark spoke about that last year, is that car is a place where it's your friend. You have the ability to communicate, and that's very much at the core of what the Marketing Cloud is working on. So
no, it really is. We have a kind of an early stage partnership with Jim and Ford, and we demonstrated 6-7 weeks ago at Salesforce's big user conference, Dreamforce, the connected car, where we were delivering messaging right into the dashboard of a Ford Mustang, really just using the software development kits and open platform that Ford has created. And it's really extraordinary when you start thinking about geolocation services and relevance that you know about the driver and the owner of the car. You can really deliver very targeted messaging that can be delivered via display or via voice, because we want to always have safety at the top of the priority list. But social fundamentally is really about listening, it's about engagement, it's about building those one-to-one relationships at scale. And I thought Dick did a really nice job talking about how one-to-one now has a positive ROI, because it's always been good business to take care of your customers and provide excellent customer service. When you do so via social channels, it gets amplified, and it gets amplified in such a powerful way that the ROI is there in a big, big way.
Well, on that note, I think 1859, Charles Dickens and Charles Darwin, 2014, Jim Farley, Carolyn Everson, Andy England, Scott Dorsey, Maurice Levy, and Dick Costello. Thank you very much, and thank all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you very much.